Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Stoa, another session in our Unsuccess Symposium. Let us get successful so we can stop giving a shit about getting successful. And we have Piers Steel with us. And the title of today's talk is "The Procrastination is the New Normal," because Piers, according to his website, he likes to think he's amongst the world's foremost researchers and speakers on the science of motivation and procrastination. I tend to agree with that. He's a distinguished research chair at the University of Calgary. And he teaches human resources and organizational dynamics. And he has a book called The Procrastination Equation. And then we're corresponding over email, like, what should we talk today at this Unsuccess Symposium? And he's like, give me a topic, Peter. I could talk about procrastination from 100 different angles. I'm like, how about we talk about it from all different angles and have sort of a transperspectival approach, maybe from a philosophical lens, psychological lens, sociological. So I'm not quite sure of what he has in for us, store for us today, but how today's going to work. Pierre is going to share his thoughts for about 10, 20 minutes, and then we'll pivot to the Q&A. Just put your question in chat, and I'll call you to unmute yourself. So that being said, Piers, welcome to the Stoa. Oh, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Here I am. Okay. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And so we're going to talk about 15, 20 minutes about procrastination. What could be more natural? We should also start a little late, I imagine, given the topic. We should kind of dander and dilly-dally a bit before getting to it. But it's true. This is my backyard. I've done it for about 20 years. And people say research is me search. And that's certainly true with me in this topic. Kind of a semi-reformed procrastinator. At least reformed enough, I got a research chair position, which is hard to get. So I'm doing decently, right? Of course, your kind of notion of success always changes with every new accomplishment. It's kind of like called the hedonic treadmill. That no matter what success we get, we're not ever really satisfied with it. And being unhappy with your level of success is often usually somewhat adaptive. So the kind of the entire premise that we're going to be able to forget this thing about success is, I don't think so. Even billionaires, tremendous lack of self-knowledge, ask how much money they need, and they say, oh, just another couple billion, then I'll be happy, right? And it's actually called the happy peasant frustrated achiever problem. So, but despite all that, and despite the fact that the need for achievement, though it's associated with wealth, and the wealth is associated with happiness, that need for achievement, that sense of dissatisfaction in one's position is not associated with happiness. It's societies encourage it. Adam Smith talking about, this is a good thing. It's a myth, somewhat, right? But that you're going to kind of solve all your problems through materialism. So success can be defined very broadly. Whatever it is, whatever goals you may have, and it may not be material, you're going to want to get stuff done, right? And we live in a world nowadays that is designed exquisitely to prevent that from happening. It is all these beautiful AI algorithms, and the fact that really none of us have privacy anymore, that there are really, all that vacuuming of all of our knowledge has been used pretty much about how to place the perfect video snack in Google's and YouTube's algorithm, or what comes up in social media. And this is quite, not one ever in human history has ever actually had to deal with this. You can go back historically, and I have, to about the time of Thutmose III. And there is a tomb that kind of in Al Kab in Egypt, which still has the hieroglyphs of that time. And sure enough, there are some there's some notions which unfortunately do not talk about a buried Stargate. That would be way cooler. But they do mention that, you know, we stop putting off work so we can get home in time, which is incredible. So we invented work, and then we invented how to put it off. And you can track procrastination throughout history. You know, you can go to the time of Harold and the first poets, and it's in most of the religions. You know, procrastination is moral defilement. That's from Buddhism, which is usually the feel good, but they didn't really like procrastination. And, you know, there's fun ones like, dear Lord, make me chaste, just not today, right? Kind of funny. I like that one. But it doesn't really take off until the Samuel Clemens and the Industrial Revolution about 1750, where we finally kind of separated production from simply muscle, human and horse, and got it into burning coal and energy. In fact, for most of human history, GDP and the amount of energy you burnt were like pretty much matched. We've only recently kind of separated from that, where we can still have economic growth without burning it. But with wealth comes temptation. And where it used to be just more of a religious problem, a common religious problem, where, you know, people would put off their prayers, their meditations, their good deeds, because, you know, there's always tomorrow. W.C. Field was caught having a Bible by his deathbed, and he was like, called it cramming for the finals and looking for a loophole. So, you know, last minute, you know, putting it off until the last minute. But it does kind of speak to it being an enduring part of humanity. But it has been accelerated because, you know, like principles of marketing, it's, you know, price, promotion, placement. And when you have temptations everywhere around us and perfectly designed and targeted to us, that makes it really, really hard to get stuff done. And that's the world we've created. Commerce, the entire type of economic viewpoint, is perfect as long as we're all completely rational. If we're quasi-rational, somewhat, I mean, we've got these kind of heuristics kind of built in, the entire system is designed to identify them and exploit them. And so as capitalism goes on, it actually becomes, in some ways, less efficient at creating happiness. Because instead of just kind of dealing with it, they're actually looking for flaws, as it would in any type of our decision-making system. And so we're at this kind of really interesting point where the hacking our own operating system is so much more efficient than our ability to patch it. And in fact, really some of the only solutions is simply to walk away, to kind of turn your back on social media, because it will kind of accelerate and pull you in on all these particular temptations. And, you know, well, I can let my wife get that in 1 minute. The reason why it's there, though, the reason why we procrastinate so much is simply a built-in temporal discounting function. You have to have it. Anything has to have, basically, any sentient creature has to have three things. One is it has to have some type of idea of how the world works, an expectancy of actions of the world around, of how it's kind of going about. It has to have a worldview of some element. I mean, in economics, they call that expectancy, or more general from psychology in terms of action that call just simply self-efficacy or self-confidence. Then you have to want something. Having a worldview isn't enough, or you're just going to sit there. You have to want something, so you have to have value. So you have to have certain desires for hunger and needs and for reproduction. But the third thing is you need a temporal discounting function, because some things happen in the future, some things happen now, and you need to be able to prioritize. So you prioritize by value, by expectancy, and also by time. And you see that in all creatures, from mice to men. And if you want to get into neurobiology from it, it's I promise that it's basically a limbic system, which are evolutionary older ones. So we kind of share with all ones common in the family, our historical evolutionary family tree from about 300 million years ago, and a prefrontal cortex. So prefrontal cortexes are really, really good at making plans for the future. What I want to do this kind of weekend. Limbic system is a here and now. It's a more reactive stimulus response, and it gets hypercharged if it's within line of sight, and it can smell it and taste it and feel it. And so procrastination basically happens when we make plans for the future using the prefrontal cortex. And the other part of it is the limbic system overrides it. And some people call this the parliament of the mind, and the doer versus the thinker. And you got all these analogies, horse and rider, two horses pulling together, some pulling apart, like Plato, and they actually put people in fMRIs and find, lo and behold, hey, it's not so much of an analogy, it's actually a pretty fair description of how it's going on. So the modern world preys on that limbic system, and it's very, very quick. And if it can get you to a temptation under 5 seconds, the prefrontal cortex doesn't even have a chance to wake up. So we are constantly beset by foregoing larger but later goals, ones that are kind of really life fulfilling. And it might be going on a travel adventure, or getting together with, I guess not a quarantine analogy, but we'll go there with friends, or working on some type of large project or book versus some type of game on our phones, or rant, or reading some type of a new blog, or getting that, often people going for some type of outrage fix by reading some type of news item that has really nothing to do with their lives. But, it feels good. So given that we have this brain that really is more short-term, in terms of animals, we're still rock stars. I mean, the next one that closest has our ability to delay gratification are chimpanzees. There's a monkey in the Furvoric Swedish zoo that's remarkable because it'll gather stones in the morning to throw at visitors in the afternoon. So it's like thinking 6 hours ahead, which is amazing, right? But for us, we have 4-year degrees and retirement plans, and it's like now a time horizon that is absolutely ridiculous compared to what we evolved for, which is usually about how long food takes to rot, right, or to capture. But we still have to get these kind of like long-term goals done. That's success. So you have this kind of brain that's not really evolved for our civilized world. Now, we're not going to give it up. I love having heated houses, and lack of insects. But in terms of our motivational wants, it doesn't do a mismatch. Then you layer on top of that a world which is now actively hacking our motivational systems, and it is really a shit show in terms of motivation, motivationally toxic, right? So that's the world. That's the world we live in. There it is. What are we going to do about it, right? There's a lot of things you actually can do. Some of them are simple. One of the ones, this one has been butchered so many times, I almost don't want to bring it up. Mostly you know this from, it's been derived so many times from a 1982 newsletter by Greg Doran. And he was just spitballing about how to deal with teams. And he said, I'll put in an acronym. And you might know that acronym because it came out to be SMART goals. Now, yeah, fine. Thanks, Greg. That was okay. There's lots better ones. But basically, of like 20 different techniques, one you might think is reverse engineering when you have your motivation. So we know we have motivation just before deadlines, and that's actually the way it is because time's got small. When time is small, that's a temporal discounting, the motivation of expectancy and value goes up, and we're going to try and move around those three variables. So you reverse engineer it and you think, okay, when do I actually have motivation just before deadline? What type of deadlines? Really concrete, specific ones, which you can see. And they can't be too challenging, so they have to be challenging enough, but not impossible. And you can play around with that a little bit, but you kind of put that together. So if I can create my own artificial goals, like diamonds, they detect diamonds are better than artificial diamonds are better than naturally occurring ones. They have a better carbon lattice, and that's how they detect them. So you can create artificial goals better than naturally occurring ones, which means you now can create your motivation somewhat, because right now we want motivation, but before the deadline, it's like we're thirsty and we want to drink. So right now it comes from an eyedropper, which leaves us something, and just before the deadline it comes from a fire hose, right? Which is too much, and you just want a glass. So we said, okay, well, we'll try and figure that out. And so if you make these artificial deadlines that have really, people screw this up the most, like really specific, as if you're talking to a different person and giving them instructions, right? A lazy different person. So you want to kind of like say, like, hey, you should exercise this weekend. Yeah, okay, great. And people might say, hey, I should exercise. You're actually doing yourself motivational harm. Less likely to follow through, because the very act of saying I'm going to exercise gives it's almost Freudian. It gives a secondary reinforcement. It gives a feeling of satisfaction, a virtue of just saying it, and actually decreases the chance of following through. So you want to actually do something specific. And I might say, okay, when this weekend? Well, Saturday. Well, Saturday's a big day. What time Saturday? And they say, well, Saturday morning. Well, this is before breakfast or after breakfast? It's after breakfast. So like immediately after breakfast? Yes, immediately after breakfast. And what are you going to be doing? Well, I'm going to do exercise. Well, what? Where are you going to exercise? Well, I'm going to go for a run. Where are you going to go for that run? Right? How long? So you're going to, after breakfast, you get your shoes, you put them on, you're going to do this route. Now you're starting to create motivation, right? And it's basically what you're doing is translating a prefrontal cortex plan into terms the limbic system can understand. Limbic system has the amygdala, and that's where your motivation is. That's your source of motivation and emotions. And you can layer a lot of other things on top of that. One thing is, for example, a form of public pre-commitment by promising people, hey, I will run with you. I'll take a picture of myself at the end of my run and share that. You can count on it. And now you have accountability, and people like to be seen to be as accountable, so that increases it. That's one bread and butter element that really should be taught in high schools. Another one is simply the proximity of temptation. It's the easiest other one. Professional writers, for example. I think I'm running out of time, aren't I, Peter? We're to tie it up. You said 15, 20 minutes?
We can go to the bottom of the hour if you like, somewhere 8 minutes.
Yeah, sure. I'll just throw in another technique or two. Temptation, it's one of the biggest predictors. So a lot of professional writers disable their internet connection, which is kind of annoying. Really, it is, all these things could have been designed to help us. Like the knowledge of our information could be designed to put things in our way that increases our life success or to increase our happiness, but they're not. Maybe in 100 years, we'll have a different type of society. But right now, it's we don't. So it's basically, can I get temptations to be less obvious? And one of the ones, and this will circle around to the third one, is, for example, most people's iPhones. And all the rings and dings and notifications and just turning them off. A lot of people say that if you turn off your rings for your email, you get an extra 2 months of productivity a year, which is a heck of a lot. We ask people when they are most productive, it's uninterrupted blocks of time. So what is interrupting your blocks of time? I do email, but I let for my mind to naturally wander. And then I'll open it up and I'll do a stint because, why not? But I don't allow that precious flow state to actually get interrupted externally. That's motivational evangelism, really. And there's other ones, for example, about energy. This is a simple one. I'm giving you the easy ones that you can do today. When do you have the most energy, right? Okay, what do you do when you have the most energy? What type of tasks? So you're doing your easy, stuff like, your correspondence when you have the most energy, and you're doing the hardest stuff when you have the least, probably during the 2 o'clock circadian slump, which is the worst time of the day. And it's saying, well, if you just rearrange that, if you got in the habit of doing your hardest work when you had the most energy, you could actually get a lot more leisure time as well. And then you have an idea of a balanced life of success. And that's my definition of success, is how can I still have health, family, entertainment, and get my shit done, right? That is what I want. And how do I do that? By having concentrated work where I'm getting things done quickly and focused. Work tends to expand to fit the time available for it. Cut the amount of, one technique I've seen used successfully is giving you half the amount of time in the day to do whatever your project is. So whatever you have to do, give yourself less time so you can feel a sense of urgency and concentration. Then once you can do that amount of time with concentration, open it up a little bit longer. You're trying to do errorless kind of learning. Giving yourself more time of crappy habits is just making those crappy habits, a pointless ritual. You want to kind of be practicing good form. All right, I can tie it there. No, book, right? I could do the entire book, but I'm not going to.
So start putting your question in the chats, calling to meet yourself. Anything goes. Any questions related to the strange attractor of procrastination?
Yeah, try and stop me. I would like to.
Feel free to ask Piers.
I would find that exciting.
So I'll ask you the first question. Acrasia, the kind of the philosophical term. How did the ancients deal with it? Do you have any techniques you can share?
Yeah, that is going to. We have acrasia, and we're going back to Aristotle. Socrates thought, what was it? Man cannot knowingly do wrong. So the idea of the divided mind, he didn't really kind of believe it. And then strangely enough, the economists, though they don't know it, are falling in the Socratic tradition that particular way. They did have an issue with it. I got a little section in the book about it, looking for quotes and people talking about it. You even have like the famous one, like Cicero. We have even Mark Antony talking about it in the Senate. Wow, they kept really good records back then. It's amazing that lasted till now. And that procrastination was only useful in the sense of for war, to kind of lay in preparations to win it. So, but really, the more modern work is to put off despite expecting to be worse off. Some people play around with it and just say any forms of delay is procrastination. But it's really an irrational delay. So it's a delay that I would be worse off for doing this later. If I do this now, I'd be better off. And that doesn't mean it's going to be enjoyable now, but it'd be even less enjoyable later on, even harder later on. And yet you don't do it. So it's kind of this kind of very self-harm by your own standards. Now, sometimes you get that wrong and it's canceled, which is great, but it's your expectation. And so when people procrastinate, they more likely are to be less happy, less healthy, less wealthy, less of everything, because it's, it's by their own definitions irrational. As for how they did it way back then and dealt with it, I don't have that time-specific historical techniques. I don't have a catalog of, sorry, but I can give you modern ones.
Cool. We'll pivot to the Q&A now. Let's take in Chris. Chris, if you're going to mute yourself.
Hey, Piers. Thanks for coming on. I probably should have asked AJ this, but what is the science behind shaming ourselves for lack of productivity, and sort of just seeing the sort of adaptive function behind it?
That's
I know it's not a
yeah.
good one, but it's a short one. But yeah.
No, I like that one. Actually, there's been a lot. I think Tim Pitchell, who's from Carleton University, also has a lot of good stuff in procrastination. That's one of his specialties. You find that a lot of shame is, okay, if you're feeling like guilty about not doing something, what is the shortest way to feel better about it? Is by shutting it out of your awareness, by pushing it back, by putting in a video game. So we tend to kind of like, when we've delayed something for too long, we tend to delay it even longer. And part of it is, it's that shame. It's the lack of self-forgiveness. And he argues that in order for people to deal with their procrastination and weakness of the will, a lot of it you have to start off with is by simply forgiving yourself for having these very, very human elements. And I agree with that. We should forgive ourselves for being human. For having a temporal discounting function, for being susceptible to $1 trillion advertising campaign that's really targeted individually against each of us. Those are hefty kind of elements. The thing is also one of the elements is not to have a dichotomous view of success here, in that it's all or nothing. So, we try and get an exercise, work, some type of routine going. Routines, again, are excellent ideas. If you always have to decide when you're working or not, it means that you don't build up associations and it doesn't become habitual, which is bad. You want to get good habits, not bad habits. And there's a lot of, I one time did a kind of little thing looking about all the aphorisms about habits I could get, and I think I stopped at about 50. First cobweb zinc cables, lots of good ones. But in this particular way, when you break a habit, let's say you go on vacation and you come back and it's hard to get whatever your habit is going again, and let's say you fall down. It's some people call it the abstinence violation effect. Alcoholics, they give it, they don't want to drink, they get in and have a drink, and they said, then they just go crazy and have like 100 of them. But they could have stopped. It would have made a difference to stop at 2 or 3 or 4, right? It would have made a difference to stop at any of one of them. So if you have a bad day, or you don't, you really should have a disaster recovery plan, is what makes sense. What can you do? You have a spare chute you can pull, saying, okay, this is my goal. This is what I want to do. What do I do when I fail? Instead of having shame about it, you have to forgive yourself shame and saying, all right, I am going to do my best, but I might not succeed on it. If this doesn't work, what is my next plan? And shame gets in the way of recovering from failure as well as preparing for it. So yeah, good on Tim Pitchell.
Any follow-up question, Chris? No? All right. Campbell, You're up.
Hey, Piers, thanks so much for being here to talk today. I was just thinking about this article I read a couple of years ago about how I think it was aimed at millennials that they were having trouble like doing just basic tasks that were kind of time sensitive, but not like high priority, I guess. So I was just wondering if there's certain generations or cohorts that are prone to procrastination more like due to environmental.
That's a good question. Really, because this entire kind of cohort thing, it gets confused with so much with simply maturation and time of life. And I even did a paper on this about the world is going to hell and the young no longer respect their elders. And basically the point was finding quotes of that in every century going back 2,000 years, right? And we were successful. Some centuries we couldn't find one, but we kind of figured out, we made our point. But the idea here is that, there are kind of challenges with youth. One is, and as well as technology. So one is it's simply very young people are actually still wiring up the prefrontal cortex. And they're still learning self-regulation skills. So those two things just necessarily means that younger people tend to be less conscientious, tend to be, right? We're not, again, painting an entire group of people the same way is wrong. It's like saying like, well, men tend to be taller than women, therefore there are no tall women. That's just dumb, right? But the one side is technology. Younger people tend to be early adopters. So technology is designed mostly to thwart motivation. So, Instagram, TikTok, these are all kind of entertainment elements. They're all trying to be 100% available. They're all designed with your information. Never in society has we developed such an amazing temptation as that. So yeah, they would have particular problems. Also, concentration, you have to learn it in some case, build up to it. Going back to the same type of thing that you dislike. If we're surrounded with all these distractions, it will kind of act as an impediment towards being able to concentrate on one thing for a long period of time. However, is it got to do with being the youth of today or just being young in this technology? And it's the later.
Any
Gotcha. Thanks.
follow-up, Campbell? No, you good?
Yeah, I guess I was wondering too, because of the particular meta crisis that might be unfolding now, if there's a relationship between the meaning of tasks and procrastination that's different, that would make this kind of experience unique, guess, compared to previous generations who were suffering from lack of motivation.
Here, I'm getting a little bit of. There you go. Meaning, that's value, like the three big things of motivation. Expectancy, a lot of aphorisms around that. Some fun ones, like everything's created twice, first mentally, then physically. I always like that one. You have to believe it, right? You have to believe there's a chance of success in order to pursue a course of action. Like if I told you, there's a gold bar temporarily outside your back door, right? You're not moving towards it because you do not believe it's there, as you shouldn't, because it's not, at least not like that. But it might be, but you'd have to believe it to go and get it. So there's all these things that are possible around our world that we simply don't believe are. One of the things is, for example, our own capacity is usually done by who we were. So we have a viewpoint of ourselves that's historically correct, but we've been evolving as individuals, so it no longer is. So we tend to underestimate our capabilities. We talked about time and impulsiveness, making goals short-term. But the third one is, again, value, meaning. And when we ask people what they put off, it's usually things they find boring. It's usually and boredom is natural. I mean, if you would have to be, boredom is basically nature way of saying this is irrelevant to you. So it's a built-in kind of mechanism to help prioritize stuff. So boring stuff is said, okay, don't pay attention to that. That's an emotion to try and create a sort of action. Now we've got civilization, and actually some of the boring things are worth a lot of money. But our first kind of reaction to it is it's not. Now, some people have a beautiful kind of mindset because some of you will put off cleaning, right? And some of you put off by cleaning, right? So we don't like the same thing. Some people have an intrinsic motivation towards certain tasks, and that makes it much more easy for them to be successful on them, because intrinsic motivation means they receive the rewards while doing the task instead of afterwards. That's why it's very difficult to be successful completely through intrinsic rewards, because they're necessarily temporarily discounted in the future. Well, if you can find something that actually kind of deals with your present motivation or skills, which can be kind of difficult to determine, that means you'd be more motivated to do them during the time. Of course, that deals with meaning as well. Here's one I like to use. These were the things that people tend to remember too, so I try and throw them in. It was like two people were building a wall, and one was lovingly making each stone perfect in its place, and one was just slapping together. And they asked what the person who was slapping together what he was doing. He said, "I'm building a wall." And the person who was taking time and doing exquisite work, when asked what he was doing, he was saying, "I'm building a cathedral." Right? So what is the role of you? Kind of like, what are you doing? I mean, and it can be kind of done a lot of different elements. I'm in Calgary. Some people see their jobs as, getting a paycheck. Other people saying, I am making this, province, this nation successful, right? I'm providing jobs. I am, using these funds to kind of to help people around the world, right? There's a lot of meaning in any particular type of action. It depends how you kind of extract it. So yes, if you can find meaning in it, even the most seemingly boring of tasks can become intrinsically motivating.
All right. We'll take in Laura. You had a question, Laura, about art and creativity.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, thank you. I'll just read it. Do you have any recommendations for working with procrastination of creative work? I sometimes still fall for the false sense that nearing the deadline gives my writing a clarity and a sense of urgency, or that I have to wait for the proper inspiration.
Yeah. This is actually getting Adam Grant stuff. And he and I have talked about this. Overall, he's a pretty good guy. I absolutely hate his work on this. Absolutely fucking hate it. And I'll tell you why. It's okay. Incubation periods. That's what you're talking about, right? It's been going on for 100 years. How it kind of basically works. So if you want to be creative about something, the 3 o'clock in the morning crowd, AM, just before it's doing, not that creative, believe that or not. You get an early start on it. You really work on it. You go as far as you can till you're stumped, right? Then you step away. You have an incubation period. Then you get back to it after this time. So there is a delay there. And you now have time to play with it without the sense of urgency to actually kind of going through. And time again, professional creative people are often very much orderly and organized and conscientious. They, like writers, professional writers say, even the ones that procrastinate, like Margaret Atwood, says, yeah, I sometimes spend the morning doing nothing, but they will not go to sleep until they get their 600 words a day or 1,000 words. And if they say, if I have to be up 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to get my 1,000 words in, right? I do not go to sleep until I do it. And some people say, yeah, I'm only work when I'm motivated, and I make sure I'm motivated between 9 and noon each day. There's other ones. Ronald Dahl had a great system. He had only let himself work 2 hours a day, right? And he loved stopping halfway through paragraphs. How does it feel to stop halfway through a paragraph? You want to get back to it. His entire idea of motivation, and it was to make sure that there was a link between the end of his work and the beginning of the next one, and always to have a sense of frustration that he can't get enough done in that time. So it really kind of actually worked really, really well for him. So here's the question most people have regarding motivation. It is, in a deadline. It says, okay, so I only get creative just before the deadline. And so I only have motivation just before deadline. I said, well, who's creating that deadline? How is that convenient for you? This is not about you. You're losing autonomy. Something else created that deadline, not you. So if I could give you a button or a pill that you just simply take and you get motivation earlier, would you want that? And most people say, God, yes. So I said, then we have some honesty now. It isn't that you don't want the motivation early. You just told me you did. It's that you've resigned yourself to not being able to find it, right? Until just before the deadline. And it's almost like I give up. This is the only time I can do it. And then you try and build your life around this limitation, which is inconvenient. So I would say, let's when do you want your motivation to be? Let's see if we can move it to when it's on your schedule for your life by your values, instead of what is actually being created by somebody else, when they decide the deadline. How's that? Bang? Okay, there we go.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. I'm going to take in Anjan next.
Hey, Piers. I really liked your example of like writers who are able to push the temptation away. Like I think of the example of Maya Angelou locking herself into motels, or Nabokov writing in a car.
Oh yeah.
George R. Martin, cabin in the woods with an old computer that only runs WordPerfect or something. I find so much of my work now is like digital first. Like I have to use a computer.
Yeah.
I can't cold turkey, and I feel very much that the stimulation of the internet is such a fantastic avoidance mechanism, because you don't even notice it. You Control T, hit something, by the time you're even conscious of what you've done. So I'm curious how, when you have to use a computer and you may have to have the internet, how do you handle temptations and procrastination?
Yeah, and it's you're not the first writer who experienced this, or trying to kind of like, we can go back to historical ones, just like Herman Melville used to give his clothing to his valet so he wouldn't pop down to the pub, right? And who was it? Someone had his wife chain him to the desk. The name escapes me, but yeah, because it's wonderful having written, isn't it? Not so much having to write. I mean, Douglas Adams, we have so few books from him because he was an incredible procrastinator. He used to say, deadlines are wonderful. They make a tremendous whooshing noise as they go by. Okay, so yeah, it's difficult to do. But there's some writers actually take their computer, their laptops, and blow out the internet connection. Used to be, some people would put like a super glue when in back was a plug-in, or they'd take it to the shop to actually do that. I think that's kind of extreme. There's other ones to do it. Some people, for example, you can get on the internet anytime you want. But you have to put in the code. The password is not preloaded. Password's about that long, right? And they'll put up on the wall somewhere. And it takes about a good minute or two to do it. That forces you to actually have a fully shaped desire. So much of the internet is just like the barest whisper of a whim. And so when you want it, and willing to put in the effort for that, yes. Other people deal with having two computers. Now you have a play computer, and a lot of programmers do this, and a work computer. So you have to have a different space from where you actually go and do any type of social media or anything. So the associations around you in the computer screen, and make the computer background different, make the sound, open up a different sound package, make so they're completely kind of separate. And this is actually the exact same type of thing they do for sleep hygiene as work hygiene, right? So the cues will eventually build up. And remember, you have to step away. You can use that other computer anytime you want, but you have to step up and go to them. So you still have autonomy, you still have freedom, but eventually the associations will do it for yourself, and you'll find out, and this is the goal. 3.5 hours has passed, right? Right? 800 words just appeared, right? And that is basically the payoff from it. When you're doing everything at the same place, right? This is like if you read up the sleep hygiene, you're now getting two incompatible motivations being cued by the environment. So it's like work or play, right? And it's like constantly, I could work or play. I could work or play. And it's like scratching, like a cat scratching the door. Okay, sure you don't want to play? Okay. I'll check again in 15 seconds. You sure you don't want to play? And that's constantly going through your head. And it's because you're doing both in the same place. I guarantee this will work. We are wired almost at a cellular level for this to work, as long as you let the associations build up.
Any follow-up question? Looks like you're nodding your head in deep agreement. Cool. Let's see. Abhay, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Piers, thanks for doing this. I think what I often find is that a framing for a cure for like my lack of motivation or a cycle of procrastination is a one-time exercise that would help me just catch up with the backlog. And then I get into a loop of procrastinating that exercise of, whatever I associate with clearing the backlog. And I get into this bit of a loop where there's tension about clearing the tension too. I wonder if you have any comments about that dynamic.
Yeah, usually there's a certain level of success or comfort that we have, and we're kind of balancing duties and pleasures. And for me, it's about I'm working and I'm letting things get messy around me. And I'd rather do work than clean up the mess. And eventually, the mess gets to the point where it's now impeding the work, and then I'll go through and get it all back to the restart position. I have no problem with that, right? I forgive yourself for that. It's fine. Just as long as from the big point of the position, that the backlog is eventually, and you have the tools for that, and you don't let it become like an episode of Hoarders or something like that. I don't think we have to. I've often argued that we don't have to be perfect. It's like life is a lot like swimming with sharks, right? You always want to bring a friend along when you're swimming with sharks, because you're never going to swim faster than that shark, right? All you have to do is swim faster than your friend, right? And that's life. You don't have to be perfect. We're not competing against angels. We're just competing against other human beings. Let's be better than the competition. That's good enough.
Cool. Any follow-up question?
No, that's great. Thank you.
All Right. So I'm going to read this question on behalf of Claudia. How do you effectively communicate to someone else that their procrastination habits are useless and wasteful of valuable time? That if they simply just get things done, it would lead to faster results and more free time.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers in there. You know, even they've probably, to some extent, they're taking an emotional coping strategy, most likely about their problems. And one way is, you know, there's a lot of ones that can make you feel better about your bad habits. Downward comparisons, comparing to other people, distractions, minimalizing the tax. That's one. It's almost painful to watch people who treat their own life as a joke. And but it kind of helps them basically by diminishing the importance of their own goals to deal with the fact they're failing at it. It's another type of it also deals with these people who are self-handicapping. That's another one. It's self-handicapping are those people who purposely sabotage their own behaviors. So they never get an honest feedback about the performance. So they can always have the out of saying, well, I never really tried. And you know, a real ugly kind of corner of what the human psyche can become. How to deal with it, again, and this is why I kind of actually got into those elements where, look, do you want motivation earlier? Do you want to have more spare time? You know, why don't we kind of figure out some elements about how to make this a little bit more efficient? You know, to get some stuff done. Like an alcoholic, sometimes it's not up to you. You can open the door and have to revisit, but they have to have that moment of clarity. And it's very much like an addiction, where, you know, they have a choice now between being able to deal with something that's going to be immediately uncomfortable for a longer term reward, or they can do more emotional to give them relief right now. And it's in their very kind of element. Some people are trapped in that and they will never get out. So the idea that you're trying to open doors for it is good. And you try and open in a complete way. And you do. There's a lot of techniques. Some are harder than others. You don't need them all. Some of the ones I talked about are the easiest ones: getting rid of temptations, energy hours, do some good goal setting, right? These are ones that can be done today, and it's really kind of useful. You also kind of want to talk about, you know, in terms of like idea of success, how many times if we only had an extra hour or an extra day, what a difference that would make. And saying, you know, and you can, if you make it small, the goal like that, say, you know what, let's take just a top off this one. I think if we can do some small things, you know, we could give you a couple of extra hours, it'll make a difference, you know. And you want to, and once they have that success, then you kind of say, well, let's try something else. Let's see how far we can do with this. Again, they'll often try a technique, botch it up almost semi-impermanently, and then blame you. They'll put it on you. I said, I thought you said you could help me, right? It's your fault, right? Because you need a sense of agency and responsibility, or you're not going to go anywhere with this. It's kind of weird. It's almost spans both sides of the political spectrum. One point, you have to have sympathy with the human condition, and that would be a more liberal kind of position. But also you have to build upon a sense of agency and responsibility, which is more conservative. And I've never believed either side had a monopoly on truth, but it's certainly being profitable to divide them. We're not getting into politics here, but a good, healthy system is with two healthy parties.
Cool. I can't help myself. I got one juicy question. If you can't answer it, if you have to leave at the top of the hour, or
No,
could you, okay, just maybe like 2 minutes after. Is there any spiritual lessons or philosophical lessons that one can tease out of procrastination? Like, for example, one of the best, I wouldn't say decisions of my life, one of the best things in my life was procrastinating at a previous job that, that I shouldn't have been in. And I'm glad I didn't get good at it. And then I found my way out of that work. So procrastination was a gift there. And then I feeling into it and journaling about it and stuff, a lot of lessons I learned about that. So any thoughts about utilizing procrastination for insights?
I would say yes, in essence, that we're too often willing to pull a motivational attribution to certain problems. It's just like this. We're just basically we're taking the entire society's problems and download it into the individual. It's your fault. You're not trying hard enough, right? Maybe you should try harder. And say, well, it might be that there's an entire absence of capital, right, for investment. So I can't be doing this. The competitors have unfair advantages, like Amazon. Apparently they will ask people to pitch them their ideas, get all their internal information, and then make copies of it. That is really hard to compete with, no matter how motivated you are. So in your particular type of position, if you're procrastinating on something, it may be because it is motivationally inauthentic. You're doing something you actually really, in some level, don't care about. Or if success is not coming to you, it's maybe because you define success in a way that really isn't impossible at this particular time. Now, often failures have their own lessons. We don't want to actually learn things that way, but they're there. So when you actually come across something and you've tried, you've given it an honest effort and it still doesn't working, you maybe consider other other explanations for the outcomes rather than your motivationally flawed.
Yeah, that definitely lands. So Piers, we're at the top of the hour. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with today? Anything that might have came alive for you?
No, this was fun. What a great bunch of people. I mean, yeah, of course, buy my book. Yeah, you don't have to read it. The buying was the important part. I do know a great procrastination joke to end with, but I'll tell it to you later.
Oh, he didn't. All right, Piers, thank you so much for coming to the Stoa. It's greatly appreciated. We have one more event today on the Unsuccess Symposium. Not so secret, the Law of Attraction, Positive Thinking, the New Thought Movement. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be quite interesting. So you can check that out there. Again, Piers, everyone, thanks for coming out to this session.